Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of CFO 4.0. As usual, I'm your host, Hannah Munro, and here today with me is a very special guest to talk about the topic of diversity, which is obviously incredibly important, but has more depth to it, I think, than sometimes we realize. So firstly, I'd like to introduce my guest. So with me is Simon Fanshawe. So Simon is partner in a consultancy called Diversity by Design, but he's also the author of The Power of Difference, a book talking all about the power of diversity. So welcome, Simon. Lovely to have you on the show.
Hello, thanks for asking me.
Well, tell us a little bit about your background, because I was saying this as we started. You've had a really interesting history in terms of organisations you work with. So tell us a little bit about your journey, both to obviously starting and being a partner in Diversity by Design, but also writing your book.
Well, I've never had a job. That, I suppose, is the first thing to say. And that's not because I'm a trustafarian. It just means that I've never had a P45. So, and I've always been freelance, which has been curious when, the lockdown happened and the pandemic happened and everybody suddenly started working from home. And I was thinking, and the story is, because I've always done that since I left university in 1978, kind of forgot to get a job, went for a couple of interviews, didn't get the job, thought, don't like that process, not doing that again. So off I set. And I've done various things during my life. I mean, I was a comic for 10 years. I've been a broadcaster and a writer ever since I suppose the 80s. So it's been a series of different things, and I mean a couple of key events in my life, I suppose. One was that the 80s was an interesting period for gay men, particularly, but lesbians as well, in the sense that there'd been a great explosion after 1967 when homosexuality was decriminalised, and all these networks grew up. And then in the 80s, AIDS, first person to die of AIDS in Britain was 81 or 82. And so the 80s were a curious combination of developing this extraordinary response to AIDS, and obviously many of us, and me included, were involved in that, and getting involved in the early days of Terence Higgins Trust. And then at the end of the 80s in the UK, we had this thing called Section 28, which was a sort of attack, really. It was using gays really to beat up what in those days were called the loony left authorities. They were really having a go at Haringey and Lambeth and all that lot. And so 6 of us started Stonewall. And between 1989 and 2014, I was only involved for those first few years, but I learned something incredibly important in Stonewall. And through those years of since 67, if you look back on the history of gay law reform in this country, and I think it reads over into organisations, which is why I mention it. And it's this, is that all the advances and getting rid of the anti-discrimination laws that were on the statute book in relation to lesbians and gays were all done without asking people to take a view of homosexuality. In other words, what we did was we built very broad coalitions around much bigger principles. And the big principle was that a group of people should not be discriminated against under the law or by the law as a group. And the thing is, if you talk to even religious people who often take a particular view about homosexuality, a theological or a moral view, they might call it, even despite that, they still understand what it means to be discriminated against as a group. Jews, Muslims, Catholics, they get it. So you can build these much bigger principles. And I think that's true of organisations where we come to work, we're strangers. We've got nothing in common when you get to work. You don't know the people at work. You might know one or two. You might have been introduced to somebody. You're basically a bunch of strangers. You have to go down to the pub and have all those conversations about, oh, yeah, I love blue. Oh, you love blue. All that. So we go through all that. The only thing we've got in common is making widgets or pizzas or saving people's heart care or whatever it is. That's what we've got in common. So what we've got to work out is how we collaborate together, given what we each bring, in pursuit of that common objective. And that's really, to me, that's incredibly important. That's how we manage to gain public support. And it's how you gain real support in companies and therefore really enhance performance in companies, because you work out what each of you can bring and you appreciate that difference and you enjoy that difference and then you combine it. And to me, that is just what lies at the heart of this idea of diversity. And we only speak about inclusion because we don't understand each other. I mean, I don't know how you see the world, and I don't know how you experience the world, and that's great. And the point is, I never will. Even if I married you, Hannah, I'd still never understand the way that you saw the world. And every couple knows this. Don't you wake up some mornings and you think, look at your partner and think, oh, I've no idea who you are. Another one is you wake up and think, I know exactly who you are. And it's that journey of discovery. That's why we talk about inclusion, because we have to understand what are the ways in which different people can contribute at their best. So that's what we mean by inclusion. So I discovered those sorts of things really through those campaigns in Stonewall. And I think that's the basis of good politics. I also think it's the basis of good organisations, is that you find that bigger principle, that common objective, and then you work out who you can put together. What you don't do is demand you don't demand agreement. I have a very particular view, say, about abortion and a woman's right to choose. I can perfectly happily work with Catholics who don't share that view. Perfectly happily. We can make pizzas together or whatever it is we're trying to do. Now, I respect their view and they respect my view. No, not respect. I tolerate in the best meaning of that word, and they tolerate my view. So that's what underlies what I do and how I try and approach this. And I think that's very refreshing for people at the moment. And it's where our consultancy, I think, does help people, because so much of diversity has become the imposition of a set of rules and prohibitions, things you can't say, things you can't do, language you can't use, and so on and so forth. That doesn't help us to appreciate what each of us brings.
And I love quite a few things in that concept, that about celebrating and understanding differences. How do we when we've got a diverse group of people, and let's be clear, when I say diverse, I don't just mean colour, sexuality. Is about people from different backgrounds or different perspectives. How do we help them to find common ground? How do we help them to find that connection, like you say?
Well, partly it's a given. I mean, if you're in, the manufacturing team or the comms team or the innovation team or whatever the hell it is you're in, that's, you've got the companies making widgets, and your role in the making widgets is whatever it is, and you as a team are supposed to deliver that. So that's your common objective. The question, I think, which is interesting is how do you create the conditions as a manager, particularly, where people, I call them conditions for success. That idea of reasonable adjustments so the Disability Act, Disability Discrimination Act requires employers to make reasonable adjustments. Well, I like to turn that round. Reasonable adjustments is when you're compensating for a negative, and important, if you've got mobility problems, it's important somebody does that. But I like to turn it round because I think everybody's got conditions for success. We've all got different things that we need in order to be able to do whatever it is and contribute whatever it is we can contribute. So if you think, for instance, say you're in a team, so you got to do whatever you got to do. You think, right, we are now going to, we're going to launch a new product, okay? And you think, well, that's what so we know what we're doing. That's our common objective, and we've decided that's the market where we're going to go to. We're launching, a new espresso maker in Italy. Really stupid thing to do, by the way. Why would you try to teach the Italians to make coffee? But who cares? You know what I mean. So there we are. This is what we're doing. So just imagine for a session that we've got to map out that marketing campaign and so on and so forth, and that we've got in the team some people who are broadly speaking introverts and some people who are broadly speaking extroverts. And there's a wonderful quote from a journalist in America called Devorah Zak, who said, introverts think to speak, and extroverts speak to think. So extroverts like me, and I have to say, there is an introvert inside me, desperately trying to stay in. But extroverts like me, see, we chat on. That's how we think what we think. Introverts don't do that. So if you're listening, and there's the problem, how do you construct the right form of discussion or contribution? How do you do that in the right stages so that both those types of people can contribute, and therefore you can use what everybody can contribute to get to the best solution? So that's how we do it, but it requires you to recognise that there is difference in the room, and it requires the introverts not to say to the extroverts, you've got to do it my introvert way, or the extroverts say, you've got to do it my extrovert way. It requires everybody to understand and literally tolerate, in the best possible meaning of that word, the different ways in which people do things. And one of the problems is with diversity as it's interpreted at the moment is that people think it's about laying down a set of lines and rules and you've got to do it this way and we've all got to agree that everybody's got to have pronouns. Everybody's got to take the knee, and if you don't take the knee, you're a racist or whatever it is. And that's very damaging because it eats away at what actually is the fundamental thing underneath this, which is the exchange of ideas and contributions in pursuit of a coffee maker in Italy.
Or not, as hopefully someone would stand up and go, perhaps this isn't the best idea.
Well, that's great. And that's the great moment. They go, hang on, everybody, are we completely batty and bonkers? Because certainly, I mean, it's very interesting, that question of speaking out. Yeah. I talk about the need to create spaces that are safe for disagreement, not safe from disagreement. So safety, much misinterpreted these days, safety comes from the ability to have disagreement and argument. It doesn't come from the absence of disagreement. So that's why we need safety, so we can argue, so we can disagree well. Now, you can make rules about how you do that in the sense that we don't shout at each other, we don't swear at each other, we tackle what each other says and thinks, we don't attack the person. So you can make some useful rules which help us to be helpful rather than unhelpful in making that discussion work. But if diversity becomes a set of prohibitions, you find it in the NHS at the moment. There's some NHS just sort of mandating language. You must ask patients their pronouns, or you must treat patients in this way or that way, or you must use this language about women or whatever. And if you don't, by the way, we'll tell you off. And at the other end of the spectrum of behaviours, they've got, and we've also got a whistleblowing policy, by the way, and a duty of candour, and we want everybody to speak up. Well, sorry, if you're looking down and thinking, well, actually somebody misused or whatever, and they were told off for it, you're not going to speak up. You're just not, because you've watched small behaviour punished. You're certainly not going to take the risk of whistleblowing. So, we've got to be clear in organisations that diversity means disagreement, and inclusion means the inclusion of difference. It doesn't mean everybody being the same. So we spend all our time, frankly, trying to unpick a lot of the stuff that people have been told is diversity, and trying to get people's contributions to flourish and flow.
So you talked about creating safe space, and you said that safe space is not necessarily about creating rules. So how can we as managers create safe spaces for people to have effective and valuable disagreements?
Well, the first thing I think is to understand in your team the different ways that people contribute and to appreciate that difference, to absolutely recognize that some people work in a very particular way. So, you will find in finance, for instance, you will find quite a lot of people who will be, as the saying goes at the moment, on the spectrum. They like to work on their own. They need quiet environments. I've got a great friend. I was talking to Oliver Heath, the architect, the other day. He spends his time designing and working on spaces that work for people of various forms. We've all got neurodiversity. The idea that something is neurodiverse is a bit odd. And we're all, to some extent, some people have mental health problems. That's a different issue. That's the thing there. But to some extent, we all need different conditions for success. So the first thing I think is you need to understand how people best contribute. And then what you need to do is play to that strength. So there's, that thing where people go, oh God, the trouble is, Hannah, we just can't do the photocopying. I mean, I've asked her time and again. Well, don't ask her to do it then. Unless your job is the photocopying person, obviously then you're in the wrong job. But, don't, in other words, play to people's strengths. So understand their differences, play to their strengths. And yes, there are rules, as I say, in how we go about our conversations. So I think useful rules are always speak to what people said and think. Don't attack them, disagree with what they said. Don't raise your voice. Don't talk over people. Listen. I always say to people, listen to hear, not listen to respond. And I have to say, most of what I say is notes to Simon, because we're not all good at this. I'm not holding myself up as being brilliant. I'm merely saying this is what I've discovered after years of working at it. You need to do those kind of things. And when you get stuck, there are some techniques that you can use. I mean, I use one which is called disaggregation technique. So if you imagine a quadrant and you take a statement at the top, we will market a new coffee maker in Italy. And then one axis is organizational and one axis is personal. And then one side of the quadrant is pros and one is cons. And you get people on their own to go around the quadrant. You time them. 4 minutes on each quadrant. They write down personal pro, personal con, organizational pro. Then you go back and say, choose two. Then everybody writes their two on a sticky and puts them up on the big collective quadrant. You've sketched out the argument. Everybody's views are up there and you can see, okay, this is interesting. Where are the balance of the argument? So there are techniques you can use as well. But the key thing is recognizing the different ways in which people want to contribute and need to contribute, and then making sure that you've created the conditions for that. And when people disagree or upset each other, which, by the way, they will, that's not an exception. That is called being human. So we cause each other lots of love, but we do cause each other lots of pain and anxiety and aggravation. So what you need to do as a manager is then, I always say, two-part process. So people have a row. Example, recruitment process recently. 4 candidates on the shortlist, 3 external, 1 internal. External person got the job. Internal person, a British Asian woman, said to the person who ran the process was racist. The person who managed both the internal candidate and the person who ran the process then went to her and said, tell me. He just listened to hear. He then went to the person who ran the process and said, tell me. And he just listened to hear. And then he thought about it for a day or two. And then he went back to both of them and he said, right, we don't want a process of recruitment in this department that cuts off any kind of talent. We want access to the most talented people. So will you help me audit this process, both of you, to see whether or not it excludes people? Now, that's a really clever solution because he focused them on the needs of the department. He didn't get involved in the argument because, you know, often when I put this to HR people, if I'm at a conference, I'll put that as an idea, you know, as a scenario. It's quite interesting. HR people often say, well, we need to go and talk to her and explain why the process is fair. And you go, well, that horse has bolted, love. She already thinks it's racist. Why are you doing that? What you have to do is listen to why she thinks that. Don't argue with it, just listen to it. You know? So people, we leap to solutions. Managers are trained constantly and told constantly, what's the solution? There's a problem. Solve it. When people clash, don't try and solve it. Stand back. Let people express. And then try and find something which, again, is about finding a common objective around which those two people can. And it's very difficult because sometimes those arguments are very personal. Notice in that example, she said the process was racist rather than any people were racist. It's more difficult when it's ad hominem or ad feminem than when it's to the person. You're racist. But then again, you see, somebody says you're racist, you're homophobic. So I have this framework for language and behavior. And I think, well, broadly speaking, I think our language and behavior is careless, thoughtless, or malicious. But don't assume malice. Because most of the ways we upset each other are by accident, by being thoughtless or careless. So again, I didn't mean it. It's not a get out of jail free card. But you need to listen to I didn't mean it, as well as that was racist or homophobic. Because what the question is, what do you want out of it? And what you want out of it is dialogue and learning, the recognition of difference, because that's what enables you to collaborate with each other. If you just indulge in what I call point and punish, well, that stops conversations.
So, can we explore that? Because I think that's a really interesting point about how you help somebody find a way through something. So, you know, whether it's diversity or something else, it's a clash of opinions that we're talking about here. So I think this applies in, you know, like my day job is transformation. A lot of the people listen to here are going through challenging transformations internally where there is often differences of opinions, right? So how do we have conversations that help the organization find a way through that transformation, even though it might be difficult for that person individually, whether that means they've got to learn a new skill, perhaps it could mean a change in job role. How would you approach that situation?
Well, there are a couple of things in what you described there, though, aren't there? One is that the conversation's difficult because of the consequences of a decision. I'll lose my job. I'll have to change. So then you're like, that's destabilizing, and people are uneasy.
Yeah.
There's another problem but the other thing about difficult conversations is when I don't like your attitudes. For whatever reason, we've clashed. I think, you think I'm a bully. I think you're sexist, whatever it is. And I need some. So they're slightly different, I think, in nature. In both cases, though, I would say that one of the failures that we have is the assumption that the result of conversation should be agreement. It shouldn't be. The result of conversation, when you're differing, is to find a way of being able to work together. If I give you an example, I put it in a book, which, by the way, is called The Power of Difference and is very reasonably priced and available all over the shop. So, I know Joe Berry. His father was murdered in the Brighton bomb by the IRA. And I know Patrick McGee, the bomber who planted the bomb. And I was the person who moderated their conversation in public for the very first time. They'd had it in private many times. I knew Joe, and we set it up, and we did it in public. Here's what's interesting about this. You can't agree about a murder. Joe would have to say, oh, you were right to kill my father. Or Patrick would have to say, oh, I was wrong, oops. No, that's not what the conversation is made up of. The conversation is made up of an intense level of listening by the two of them. And Patrick never saying he's sorry, by the way. He will justify what he did in military terms, but he accepts responsibility for what he did. So he will say to Joe, the most difficult thing I have to do is look at you and realise the pain I caused you. And I heard him once say to Joe, I also have to understand that if you're the person you are, your father must have been an extraordinary person that he was, because he was your father and he's in you. Now, that's accepting responsibility for what he did, and it's very hard for Joe to hear him justify. She will say, I want to listen because I need to understand why you did this, because I don't want my father to have died for no good reason. So what you've got there is a dialogue, not agreement, but the ability then to go on trying to understand each other and then collaborate. And they have set up a project together called Building Bridges for Peace. And, it ebbs and flows. Sometimes it's really difficult, I understand, listening to Joe talk, and sometimes it's less difficult. Well, one of the things that we do when we have these conversations is if we really feel that we've really said what we mean and feel and think, and we've really contributed to the process, and then at the end of it, it goes in a direction that we weren't arguing for, at least we know that we were listened to. So we're engaged in it, and you're more likely to accept that. So the manager has to be very clear. When you say to a team, what you do is you go, right, we are launching a new coffee maker in Italy. That is what we are doing. What I'm asking you to do is design the process of the marketing and comms and whatever campaign. In other words, you've got to be really clear with people when we ask them to contribute to a decision, that we're not asking them, for instance, to completely upend the outcome. So my analogy is always parking. If you're a council, don't ever ask residents if they want a parking scheme, because they will say no. Don't ask them, because if they say no, well, what happens then? You either impose it and that annoys them, or you don't do it, which is not what you want to achieve in the first place. So what you do is you say, you're getting a parking scheme, please design it. So you have to accept responsibility for decisions. If you're a manager or a leader, to accept responsibility for the outcome. So you have to go, I am the one who's going to decide what we're going to do here. So that's my decision. I'll be clear from that at the start. Now, what I want you to do is to contribute evidence, thoughts, ideas, whatever, and that will help me to make the decision. And I will listen to you all, and I give you my promise that I will listen properly to you all and weigh up the evidence. But I'm going to make the decision. So once we've done that, then everybody goes, okay, well, if that's the direction we're going, that's the direction we're going. Okay. And if you don't like it, you can always leave. Well, not always, but quite often. And go do something else.
So I think that's a really interesting point. So if we take it in the context of transformation, that could be, we need to select a new ERP system. We've made the decision that the current one is not fit for purpose, but we need to go through a process of selecting said ERP system. Help us design the
What's an
process.
ERP system?
Oh, that's a different conversation. So a business management solution. So software to help the business run itself. That's
another rule. Can I just say, you've introduced another rule into the conversation. When you're trying to create spaces where people really do interchange and really feel safe, no one should use acronyms until everybody understands.
There you go. Another rule or guideline for having healthy conversations.
Guideline, because look, I grew up in an army environment, and I grew up with people who used to say, "Oh yes, well, have you met him, Lieutenant Colonel Sir Snoddy Snodgrass? He was ADC to the GNC in BAOR 51." And that means the aide-de-camp to the General Officer Commanding in British Army on the Rhine 45. But if you don't know that, you just think these people are really odd. Anyway, sorry, you were asking, isn't it? So you've chosen you've got to choose a new business system.
Yes. So in terms of how you would approach that conversation, but I think it's an interesting point about the type of language you use, because like you say, if people don't understand what you're saying to them, then they can't participate.
If you're going to introduce the new business system too, what you need to do is to say what you're trying to achieve with it, don't you? Because you need to give the common purpose. You've got to have an objective, because otherwise people go, well, I like that one because it's pink. And you go, yeah, well, I think having a pink one wasn't the point. So do you know what I mean? So, okay, so we've got a diversity strategy. What I find with diversity strategies is it's really hard to work out what people think they're designed to achieve. People will say, oh, no, we've got targets, and, we've got smart targets, and we've got timeline. Fine. Those are the targets. What I'm asking is, what's it designed to achieve? What will it improve about the business and the ability of people in the business to contribute? That's purpose. Targets are not purpose. Targets are just a way of explaining whether what you put together is working. That's not a purpose. The purpose is, if you Ørsted, the energy company, I think they've got to be the leading alternative energy producer in the world, or something. I'm chairman of a housing association. Everybody deserves a decent home. We will contribute to the solution of the housing crisis in South East London. Whoever you are in the business, whether you're the person who's entering the profit and loss account and doing all the financy bits, or whether you're the person who's doing the developments. Okay, who you are in the business, all we're trying to do is provide decent, great homes for current and future tenants. And everybody's got to hedge towards that. So that's purpose. Do you see what I mean? So the business system, question, what's the purpose of it?
So setting out clear purpose and then obviously asking for their contribution towards that is what we're saying is the way to go.
So my favourite question, I used to work with a radio producer who he's wonderful. But when I very first made programs with him, he'd say, well, you're making this program. And he'd say, what's it for? What do you mean, what's it for? He said, what's it for? And he would go on like this until I don't know. And I'd say things like, I don't know. It's for doing the ironing too. And he'd say, all right, well, we'll make that program. And it's great. That is a very different program from the one that says we want to explore, the influence of witchcraft in late 19th century literature. That's a different program. If you're going to do one to do the ironing to, it's all about witches and ghouls and yay, stories. Whereas if you're really exploring stuff like that, they've got to sit down and listen. Very different program. What's it for? It's a great question. I wish it were mine.
Yeah, we have the, obviously consulting, we have the phrase keep asking why till you get to the root cause, and then that's
Be a
always
5-year-old.
interesting.
That's my version of that. Be a 5-year-old.
Yep.
The sky's blue. Why? Well, because you know that thing when you've got a kid, they just will not stop. Brilliant.
One of my colleagues says, aim to be the stupidest person in the room. And I love that phrase. So you just keep asking till you understand.
Absolutely right. And a couple of examples. One is that whenever I've joined a board, a committee, a working group or whatever, if there's anything I don't understand, the thing I do after the meeting is I send an email to everybody saying, I tried to understand this, this, and this, and I didn't. What does that mean? What does that acronym mean? Because if somebody asks stupid questions, then you're guaranteed if you didn't understand, somebody else in the room did, is one thing. The other thing was that in a meeting once, we had a quite difficult financial decision to make. And somebody came to the meeting saying that because it was quite short notice, they hadn't had a chance to read the finance papers. And actually, they asked some of the best questions. And I said to this person afterwards, do you know what? I don't want you ever to read the finance papers. Because what happens to you when you read the finance papers is you get lost in the detail and then you freak out because you don't think you understand it. So don't do that. Just come in and ask the stupid questions because they're not stupid. Play to your strength,
I like that as a concept. So we've talked a lot about how to guide people. And I wouldn't even say guide, it's how to engage people in a process. So engage them in a decision. What about when you've got different characters or individuals that are involved in a shared project, but perhaps there's some clashing of views and opinions? As a manager, how can you manage that effectively?
The answer is it's extremely difficult. And I would sound glib if I just went, oh, well, there's three, let me give you 3 pointers, and it's sort of like Christmas cracker approach to, management. I do. One of the best books that I know about, obviously this is the second,
apart from
the second best book I'm going to recommend to you. There's a really good book called The Fearless Organization by Amy Edmondson. She just published a new book, which I think is called it's called something like The Right Way of Being Wrong. What she specializes in is this, she calls it psychological safety. I call it spaces the safe board is given up from. It's, number one, it's very difficult. It's complicated. What I think you've got to try and do is stay away from notions of behavior that are right and wrong or good and bad. And try and see behavior and language as helpful or unhelpful to the achievement of the team's objectives. Because if somebody is just frankly being a bit of an arse because they're talking over everybody else, because they're not listening, if you say to them, frankly, you're being a bit of an arse, that's very defensive for them. They're going to end up feeling defensive. They're going to go, but no, I'm just fed up with it. I'm just doing, all that behavior. Whereas if you say to them, here's the thing, Tony, what we need to try and do is we need to try and get everybody around the table. And actually, when you did that the other day, it wasn't terribly helpful to the discussion. And I know you meant well, but it didn't help us to get to where we want. So can you just have a thought about what might be more helpful? Did you think it was helpful or unhelpful? And so, in other words, try and take it down to the way in which that group of people is functioning, rather than telling them off, point and punish. And the reason for that is that it may well be wrong. I mean, they may well have said something that really offended somebody else. I mean, somebody told me one the other day, which was, this was 3 colleagues in a lift in a conference in Japan. So they'd gone from London, they were jet lagged. This woman had had a nap. And a male colleague said to her in the lift in front of a female colleague, because her hair had gone like that, because she'd slept for an hour or two and her hair was a bit, jet lagged. He actually said, well, you look like you've just had a shag. And he thought it was funny and jokey and whatever. They know each other well, and the person who told me this story was the 3rd person in the lift, who said, Ben, or whatever his name is, Ben, that's just not, and she said, that's just not helpful. That is not a helpful thing to say. Oh, we've known each other for ages and ages and ages. And she just went, actually, no, that doesn't help Jenny to go into this next meeting. Now, I just thought it was quite interesting. I mean, it was completely unacceptable, by the way. And what you want to say is, Ben, that is just completely unacceptable. Just stop it. That's really bad news. My point being is that I had to go into this meeting, and she was trying to find some way of getting him to realise that actually it was a really crass, offensive thing to say, even though he knew her really well. But that could have been another argument. Now, you might want to take him by later on and say privately, actually, Ben, that was effing offensive.
Yeah.
And you really need to think about why that's not funny in a work context. If you're in the pub, that's up to you, not at work. But if you're in the pub and she's a friend and that, well, then you can take responsibility for that. But you see what I mean? So what I suppose I'm trying to say is that it's not easy, and these examples always sound a bit glib. But what they're fundamentally about is about you're at work. You're trying to work together. So when somebody says something that is heard to be racist or offensive or sexist, or somebody dismisses a middle-aged man as just a white stale male and pale. Excuse me. You're working with them. How dare you just dismiss somebody? That is as bad as saying, the thing with women is they can't do this, that, or the other. Or black people really aren't suited to these kind of jobs. Or the trouble with gay men is they're all so superficial. It's the same thing. I don't buy this kind of hierarchy thing of, punching up and punching down and privilege. It's complete nonsense. Fundamentally, you mustn't go around dismissing groups of people as individuals who you then make groups of people. So it comes down to what helps us to work together. And what's odd is that you can work with people you don't like, as long as you've found a way of working together which works. You don't want to go to the pub with them. You don't want to hang out with them. You don't want to discuss anything else with them, but you're fine to do work with them.
There is something in that, isn't there? Is that there is an assumption that you should be really like best friends with everybody you work with. You should always have it. There is that kind of, and there is a culture and a push for that kind of environment. But actually, you don't get diverse. You don't always get diversity if you insist on that level of culture fit.
It squeezes out. What it does is it in the end it creates a form of conformity. Because it creates a culture in which actually, universities, you try saying in a university, they don't have university common rooms any longer, but in the old days, let's assume there was a university, you try going in there and saying you voted for Brexit. Give it a go. They don't work. And, there is this ridiculous idea that, bring your whole self to work. God forbid. I mean, what? Are people serious about this? What it meant was, where it started was, I could come to work and put a picture of my boyfriend on the desk. Well, hurrah for that. If that's what it means, hurrah. And, all those. But it doesn't mean behave as you will. That's not what it means at all. What it means is that when you contribute, you really can bring. I mean, I always talk about it's not who you are, it's what you bring through who you are. So you can bring your experiences, and you don't have to say, I've got a wife, when in fact you've got a husband when you're a man. That's what it means. But it doesn't mean you can just demand that everybody tolerates your behaviour. It doesn't mean that at all. Why would it mean that? You're at work. You've got a common purpose. Widgets, Italian coffee makers.
Whether you think it's a good idea or not, you've got to work with it. So, and I think there's an interesting topic there. And you mentioned the male, pale and stale piece. And it's really interesting because as a female in tech, I've heard that phrase a lot, right? And a concept around it. But I loved your concept of that we need to, we shouldn't discriminate against anyone, including if they are male and of a older generation. So how do we have good conversations about diversity without dismissing one group that may already be there?
Well, the key thing is that diversity is not about thinking about individuals. It's fundamentally thinking about the combination of difference. So what you'll find is that, GCHQ goes through my mind here. So GCHQ, we did some work in years ago. Great fun. Bonkers place, by the way. I mean, you go there, and honest to God, there are people dressed as wizards and such like. I mean, the people who work there are just the most, they go from the absolutely incredibly sort of conventional to the really kind of out there, because, they, for instance, in the IT department, I mean, they are running the single biggest legacy sort of spy surveillance or terrorism surveillance network in the world. Okay? I mean, it's the French, the Germans, the Americans, and the Brits started it, Talk about old enemies making new friends. Anyway, so that lot together started it. So you've got a whole bunch of people who run that legacy system. You've also got a whole bunch of people, and this is a really difficult thing for GCHQ, is they have to recruit British citizens who have an insight and an understanding of the cultures in which terrorism is being incubated. That's a relatively narrow demographic. Plus, they have to also recruit disruptors, because where terrorism and other things incubates online is not in the conventional places. So, what matters to GCHQ is the combination of probably blokes who've been there a long time, who keep that system running because they know it, and the younger people and the new people with the different ideas who aren't that bloke, who may not be older and male, who are the people who disrupt it. The value of the diversity comes out of the combination of those two groups of people able to work well together to maintain the legacy and disrupt, so that actually we are safer in our beds at night. And we used to begin every single session we did at GCHQ saying, if you don't think what you're going to get out of this session will make me sleep better at night because I'll feel safer, could you please go back to your desk and do that instead? Well, so what are you sitting around here talking about diversity if it's not going to make us safer? Why would you do that, GCHQ? But that's a classic example. So there you've got, as I say, a heritage group of people and a new group of people. And the key thing is how you combine them. So it's not that one or the other is more important. So what happens is, and the danger with this stuff is that you start to think of people just in terms of groups. So, we've got this ridiculous BAME, Black and Minority Ethnic. Well, seriously, who's in that group? I mean, there's no unity of that group in terms of family, culture, geography, religion, ethnicity, race. I mean, it's an enormous group of people. And actually, there are massive disagreements in that group of people. There are massively different lifestyles, and so on and so forth. So you've got to think, if you see, BAME people, you've got to know why you're describing people who are not white. What are you using that concept to analyse? So it might tell you something about the experience of not being white in a country that's majority white. It probably can tell you something about that. I'm not sure what else it tells you. So the COVID thing, BAME people suffered more from COVID. No, simply wrong. Read the King's Fund stuff. It's not BAME people. It's certain sections within that group of people, and it's largely related to questions of multiple generational housing, poverty, people who had to go out to work. Now, yes, of course, that's related to racism in the sense that if you're an immigrant and maybe you have lower qualifications, or you come from a country where you didn't, you came into the labour market not from an entrepreneurial point of view like East Asian Africans, you came from a poorer background, maybe it's a low-paid job. Low-paid jobs are the ones who can't work from home. So, yes, there's a relationship to racism, but you can't just go BAME people, because it's just simply not true that they were affected more by COVID. It was certain sections of it. So what you're constantly having to do in this is understand group disadvantage, which does exist. We know where women are. There are more white men called John, David and Michael in the top 300 jobs of the FTSE 100 than there are women or people who are not white. So we know certain groups of people have less opportunities than others. Why is the interesting question. So we know there's something to investigate in group disadvantage. But you're not a woman. You're a woman who's Hannah. So we've got to also look at Hannah and what's Hannah's aspiration and talent and ambition and ability and, so on. So you have to hold both thoughts in your mind. And the problem with the way diversity is too often practiced is that it's just about these groups, which leads you then to this notion, which I wholly reject, which is the immovability of these power relations. And one of the problems is that diversity is seen as immovable power relations. White people, fragile, prejudiced, racist. Black people, victims. No, those relationships change and are permeable. Just go and read Bayard Rustin or Martin Luther King. You know, Bayard Rustin, wonderful man, new Netflix special, gay man who was Martin Luther King's great chum, remarkable bloke, organised the March on Washington. But I mean, you know, what they argued for was they collaborated with people. You know, they collaborated in order to defeat racism. They didn't go, wait, whites are racist and blacks aren't. Because where's the conversation in that? Where's the collaboration in that? So what you have to do is you say, yes, there are groups of people, and yes, we listen to each other differently. I haven't done much listening to you, I'm sorry, but I was going to say, if we were in a meeting trying to do something, I'd have to be aware that I talk a lot. And I'd have to be aware that as a man, I talk a lot. And if you're a woman, maybe I have to think. I'll give you an example. From when I was a student, women have always told me, if you're on a street at night and there's a woman in front of you, do not walk behind her. Always been told this. It's scary. So if I'm in that situation, I cross the road. And I don't look back at the woman, by the way. I cross the road, and if I need to be back on that side of the road, I go far in the front. I'm not saying, oh, aren't I a good boy? I'm merely saying, women have told me this. I can understand that. I can make some action which recognises what they're telling me, and I make a contribution to not adding to that. Well, it's the same with racism or homophobia or whatever, you know? It's not who you are, it's what you bring through who you are. And it's this understanding of other people's who they are, which you can't. So you just have to listen.
So when we talk about how do we as managers, like almost taking that a step back and saying, I think when we appreciate the need for diversity in all forms, we don't want, you know, too much of anything, you know, diversity, it has its own power. How do we create, well, your top tips for us to create that environment and that safe space for people to come and bring the right things, you know, their strengths to work in the right way?
Number one, purpose. We do a process which is called the diversity framework, and that's for companies or for teams. And it's, why are you doing this? Because you can't work out how to combine people unless you know what you're doing it for. So purpose is one thing. Within that, there are two separate bits of diversity. There's the diversity dividend, which is the purpose. How do I combine these people to achieve that? So what am I getting out of it? So back to my point about the diversity strategy and the targets. Who cares if you hit the targets? If it didn't improve the business or the markets or the products, why are you doing it? Purpose. But the other bit of the diversity is the deficits. Who is not getting access in, up and across the organisation? And do you understand why that's happening? Is it legacy? Is it in the gift of the company or the organisation? Is it pipeline? Is it discrimination by your organisation or your processes? What's going on there? Because you want access to the best talent. So purpose, and then underneath that, deficits and dividends. So really understanding what's going on. Okay. Number two is when you're trying to create inclusion, purpose is important because you need to understand what you're trying to do in a group of people. So that way everybody feels that they can contribute. And inclusion is fundamentally about people being able to contribute at their best. So yes, you have to understand that there are power dynamics in groups of people. Men do take more airspace than women. Men do repeat a woman's idea and then everybody thinks it's their idea. We know there are these patterns. White people do say things to black people that assume they're not really British. Where do you come from? We know. People say to me, when did you decide you were gay? It drives me up the wall. But it's probably a conversation opener. I didn't decide, I just am. But who cares? You know. So all these things are about working out how you can get on together. And when the clashes occur, back to what I was saying before, listen to hear, not to respond, and then find a solution which enables everybody to be helpful in terms of the outcome, the purpose. Third thing is we have a debiased recruitment process, and that attempt is based on the work of somebody called Professor Iris Bonet at Harvard. And we've put into operation her research really, but it gives you three particular ways of helping you to focus on what candidates really bring rather than making prejudged judgments about them based on the person. So it debiases the process and it works around what I call the virtuous circle of selection, which is what are you trying to do? What kind of combination will help you to do it better? So who have you got? So who do you want to add? So an example, English literature department in a big university years ago asked us to help add diversity to their staff. And I went, why? 5-year-old, why? And The head of department said, because there's great English literature being written in the world at the moment by people who are not English, I want to add that to my staff and my research and my teaching. That means that's literature coming out of Kenya and Nigeria and the Caribbean. She wanted Chimamanda Adichie on her staff. That's what she wanted. But the point being is it would look like ethnic diversity. It wasn't ethnic diversity. It was cultural and geographic diversity. She was really clear about what she wanted to add for a purpose, to enrich the research and the teaching and the experience of students. So that process of going round the virtuous circle, that is a way of thinking about how you put together teams and how you recruit people. So we've tried to de-bias that process in 3 particular ways. And the last thing is with staff groups, is that what's happened accidentally, and I think it is accidentally, staff groups have been given far too much power and very little accountability in organisations. So they're now treated as if they're the fount of all knowledge about that particular group of people. Well, 2 problems with that. Number one, there's not a single voice amongst BAME people, women, lesbians and gays, whatever. There isn't a single voice. There's lots of voices. Secondly, they get those groups then, not only are they seen as the fount of all knowledge, organisations then build policy on them, which often can be ideological rather than evidence-based. So what you need to do with those staff groups is think, how are they contributing, again, to the purpose and the outcome of the organisation? What voices are they bringing that we don't otherwise hear? So that their whole purpose is related to what you're doing, not to them. It's outward looking. It's about we, not me.
On that last one, and I know I asked you to wrap up, but could you give us an example of where you've seen that be a challenge? Like, so
somebody told me only this morning. I won't say what company. Let me just say a large retailer, which you know on your high street, and the LGBTQ group, as it was known. I don't know what that group of people is, by the way. LGBTQ plus. I mean, if the plus means the allies, I don't know who's not in that group, but that's another argument. But the LGBTQ plus group demanded of the exec team and the board of this big retailer that they took a view about the so-called conversion therapy legislation that has been being argued about over the period. And the board did it. Now, here's the problem. Number one, there is no agreement between lesbians and gays and trans people, and within lesbian, gay and trans, each of those subgroups, about this notion of conversion therapy. There is a massive argument about it. So they were trying to force the board to take a single position. Secondly, what has conversion therapy got to do with retail? Answer, sweet FA. Nothing. So that's an example where this group took an ideological view driven by certain members of that group, and the board, behaving like parents who can't say no to a teenager, didn't know how to say no. And what they should have done, in my view, was to say, we do not take positions about external campaigns. We only take decisions about the ethical practice that's core to our business. Then we will make public statements about that. That'd be an example.
It's a great example. And I think fundamentally, like you say, it goes back to where we started the conversation, which is all about purpose. Are we clear on what we're doing and why we're doing it? In fact, not even the what, it's just the why.
Yeah, why is it? What's it for? Yeah.
What's it for? And if we start there and make decisions guided towards that, then it helps us, get involved in the things that are going to make a difference to our organisation.
And stop imposing things, and actually they've got to grow out of people's difference and how we can jointly do these things. It's about collaboration in the end.
It is, and I think sometimes we get distracted. We're trying to do the right thing versus actually encouraging discussion, encouraging conversation, and just as celebrating differences.
Yeah, and as a wrap-up kind of comment, I would say if you think about finance and what finance directors are doing and people in finance departments are doing, they're constantly arguing. Well, they need constantly to argue and disagree well about data and about risk. Is that right? Have we got that right? Hang on. Does that go in that budget line, or does it go in another budget line? When we're doing service, whatever it is, risk. really interesting. There's tons of research around about what happens when you get groups of men and women talking about risk and how different that is from either groups of women or groups of men. You get a very different discussion when you combine them. So those kind of things benefit enormously. The rigor that you get out of the combination of difference in finance is fundamental to the survival of organizations and the taking of good risks. So people who are listening in finance who think, oh, ethnicity and homosexuality, and that's nothing to do with me. No, you're absolutely right. It's not really. But what's interesting is when you take people who come from those differences and start to combine them, because that in itself creates an acknowledgement, a realization, and then an enjoyment of difference. And the enjoyment of difference is what produces the good discussions.
And it was really, I can't remember the podcast I had it, but I had a conversation about the importance of diversity in backgrounds, in finance in particular, because of exactly that point. If you're making judgments and calls on individuals, on businesses, on investments, but all of your team are from a privileged background, you don't understand, you don't have any diversity in background, whether that's cultural, whether that's, from different countries, then you can't make good assessments about which investments are going to work.
And if you say to people in a financial organisation, I don't know, whatever it might be, where you're providing services or a bank or whatever, if you don't have people in that bank who can bring you the experience of growing up poor, that's a really valuable insight, into loans and more, isn't it? It's a valuable insight into financial life. So it's not that you go, it's not that you're just want people like that. You want the combination again. It's the insight they bring from their background.
And I think that's kind of the lovely way to finish this, is about understanding and celebrating the power of diversity in your organisation, but doing it in a way that isn't a box ticking or a rule following exercise to take things forwards. And then you certainly inspired me on that today, Simon. So thank you for sharing all of your experience, knowledge and stories. But obviously, there's a lot to everything you do. So tell us a little bit about how people can find out more about the work that you do. And of course, the famous book that we've mentioned.
The famous book. Well, the famous book is called The Power of Difference. And it's quite good, I think. It won a prize. So that's
at least I hope you think it's good, Simon. I'd be worried if you didn't.
No, the trouble with writing a book is that you write the book and you do your very, very best, and then when you read it again and it's unchangeable, you start to think of things that you want to change. It's just inevitable. So I like it. It's a nice book, and I hope it's helpful for people. And it did win a prize, so that's nice. So that's available, Power of Difference, and it's got a lot of the research that I've talked about and a lot of the examples. So if you want to find out more about that, you can get it on Kogan page, published at Amazon, wherever you want to buy, Waterston's, whatever. The other thing, we have a company called Diversity by Design. And as I say, we do those 4 things: the diversity framework, the leading for inclusion, the de-biased recruitment, and working with staff groups for purpose. And if you go on the Diversity by Design website, or you just go Simon at diversitybydesign.co.uk, all of those places will find me, and inevitably the ubiquitous LinkedIn. Although currently, the one I got the other day, which I just love, which is I'm chairman of Hexagon Housing Association, and I got a message on LinkedIn saying, "Do your people at Hexagon have the best coffee?" It was so random. It's like, and I sent it to our chief exec, and she just wrote back. She said, "Because I always take coffee in because I like proper coffee." And so she wrote back and went, "Well, they clearly know you." That's so funny. I love that. But those are the ways of finding me, and bless you and thank you for giving me the chance to do that, because please, people, do get in contact. It would be lovely to speak with you.
And for those that are listening, I will, of course, put all of those links into the show notes so that you can access them. And of course, if you feel like I've missed a question, I think I can think of several, but I'm, rapidly ran out of time. I should have asked Simon. Perhaps we could get him on in future for a follow-up. So thank you so much, Simon, for sharing your knowledge and insight with us. And thank you to our guests for listening.